Mr. Speaker, I know when we had decriminalized marijuana back in the day, and I forget what the ounces were, when a minor was arrested for possession, obviously they would be subject to that same fine and penalty. There were provisions that were put in place to make sure, however, that obviously a minor with any amount of an illicit substance, we would want to avoid that from happening and want to make sure that they would get the appropriate treatment, parental notification, to make sure that they are getting back on the right path as opposed to just issuing a $100 fine and go away. And that was a provision that was negotiated into that back in the day. I remember at the time, it was negotiated on both sides of the aisle. But anyway, does this provision provide for treating minors differently, or if a minor is arrested for the small possession, are they treated the same as an adult, through you?
Representative Stavstrom.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, there's not specific language in this bill, but certainly under our existing juvenile justice statute, someone under the age of 18 would not necessarily end up in court. So if there was a challenge to the fine, certainly the individual could be referred to, say, a juvenile review board or et cetera, or counseling through their school. Through you.
Representative Candelora.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate that answer. And I guess, to me, this is one of the fundamental flaws with this bill. It was controversial enough in 2012 when we were decriminalizing the possession of marijuana, and you could make the argument, especially a drug like pot, that if somebody has a small amount of it, they shouldn't be treated the same way as someone with large possession. But we actually served in a chamber where we were concerned about the impact this has on children. Despite that, I think I could say anecdotally, marijuana use among kids is certainly on the rise since we decriminalized, since we commercialized it, and since we began making it very accessible in all sorts of forms so easily that children could do it in the bathroom without any scent or pop a gummy in the classroom, and it's very hard for teachers to detect. Despite all that, we at least address that concern by saying if a child is arrested for a small amount of marijuana, we didn't want to just give them a $100 fine and let them go on their way. We put a provision in place that my recollection is that it would be recorded so we could see if they'd be repeat offenders so that they could get the appropriate drug treatment and counseling. And that was a bipartisan conversation. The makeup of the chamber, I think, back in the day was very similar. But we actually cared about these children. So now today we're going to barrel ahead, reduce to a fine possession of psilocybin without even considering what impact that's going to have on kids. So it's bad enough that they may be caught with this drug, but then it's even worse that a system that catches them is going to give them a $100 fine and send them on their way. No treatment, no parents, no conversation. This is not the values of the state of Connecticut that I want to live in. That is one of the reasons I don't support this bill. The other reason I think that was pointed out eloquently by Representative Mara is the fact that, this bill didn't go through the Public Health Committee. And my other issue with this is when we debated how to handle marijuana and its commercialization, which we could all talk about the impacts it's had on Connecticut, I remember that bill as well never went through the Public Health Committee. Why? Because the Public Health Committee knew the impact it would have on the health of Connecticut. And I think the committee may have voted it down, or it died in that committee in years. And so we continually did end arounds to figure out how to get it to the floor. And we all know the story of what's happened with that. So it's a little disturbing that we're going to reduce the penalties for this drug without really talking about the mental health impacts on this drug. But we're going to only talk about the supposed good things about the drug. We're not going to have that honest conversation about the good and the bad with this drug. We're going to use veterans to pass this bill because it's going to help the people that have served in our armed forces. Well, you know what? When we passed and commercialized marijuana, we used cancer patients. That was the big argument. We need to help our dying loved ones who needed this relief. So I've seen this story before, and sadly, it may help some cancer patients, but the damage it does down the road to everybody else involved is impactful. You know, I tried to get that information of how many arrests for small possession we've had in the state of Connecticut. I did hear from one police chief. He said we've had 2 arrests for this drug. Both were connected with driving under the influence. So these are the individuals we're going to protect. People that are already driving drunk, people that are already putting our loved ones in danger, as which was pointed out tonight, that we have a family that was devastated because a drunk driver decided to get on the highway and park their vehicle and turn their lights off, which suggests it was probably a little bit more than just alcohol. But let's double down, because we haven't learned from the mistakes of our past and what we've done with commercializing pot. And you hear from everybody, you can't go anywhere without smelling it. But this is a great idea. Congratulations. I'm going to not support this bill. Thank you.